Welcome to Domain 12, Lesson 6. Today we're going to be learning about Rosa Parks, who was the mother of the Civil Rights Movement. So, from our previous lessons, we have learned that civil rights are guaranteed by law. That means they're something that many people are given and that will never be taken away. But many people have been excluded from exercising their civil rights through the history of our country. The Civil Rights Movement was a period of time in our country's history from 1950s to the 1960s when people from many races and different groups in society helped African Americans fight for their civil rights. But this later led to increased rights for people of many other groups. Today's story, you're going to be hearing about a woman named Rosa Parks. This is a picture right here of Rosa Parks sitting on a bus. The events that occurred one evening while Rosa Parks was riding the bus helped spark the Civil Rights Movement. If you listen carefully, you can find out the important role that the bus played in Rosa Parks' decision to fight for a cause. Rosa Louise Parks was born a long time ago in 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama. Her family name was McCauley. Rosa and her family were African American. Rosa grew up on a small farm with her brother, mother, and grandparents. Rosa was a happy child. She loved her family. However, Rosa lived at a time and in a place where African Americans faced discrimination. You guys remember what discrimination means? This was especially true in the South, where Rosa lived, because in that part of the United States, there was segregation. Now, segregation means the practice of keeping groups of people separate. Because of segregation, African Americans and white people did not go to the same schools, eat at the same restaurants, or go to the same movie theaters. When traveling by bus, African Americans were expected to sit in certain seats. It was as if African Americans and white people lived in different worlds. Now, these two pictures are showing segregation in the South. If you look to the left, there's an image of African American children. If you look to the right, you see a classroom of white children. This is an example of what segregation was. Because of what you looked like or things about you, you were not allowed to join others who were different from you. When Rosa was a little girl, she attended a school that was just for African American children. It was an old, one-room schoolhouse that only held classes for 5 months of each year. Far too often, there weren't enough desks or school supplies for the students. Rosa noticed that the buses took white children to the new school near where she lived. When Rosa was 11 years old, she went to Montgomery, Alabama to continue her studies. But when she was 16, Rosa had to leave school to care for her grandmother and her mother, who had become very ill. To help support the family, Rosa worked in a shirt factory. While Rosa was 19, she married Raymond Parks. Raymond was a barber. So you heard about a barber shop when you heard about Susan B. Anthony. Based on that, what do you think a barber does? That's right, they cut hair. He was also actively involved in the Montgomery chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which was also known as NAACP. So in this sentence, guys, the word chapter here means a group in a certain area that makes up one small section of a larger group. The word chapter can also refer to one of the main sections of a book. The image shows another chapter of NAACP for another state. Now, this organization wanted to make life in the United States fair and safe for all African Americans and to end segregation in the South. Rosa also became involved and served as the Montgomery chapter secretary. In addition, she returned to high school to earn her high school diploma. Then came the day in Rosa's life when she stood up for what was right. Actually, Rosa did not stand up. That's the reason why we're remembering and honoring Rosa Parks to this day. The evening of December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, was cold. The streets were full of people shopping or making their way home from work. By this time, Rosa had a job as a seamstress at a local department store. Her day had just ended, and she had rushed to catch the city bus that would take her home. As Rosa boarded the bus, she could see that it was already quite full, because the section at the back of the bus where African Americans usually sat was so full. Rosa found a seat near the middle of the window. The seat Rosa found was just behind the seats reserved for white people. Before long, all the seats on the bus were full, and several white people were left standing. Back then, the bus driver had the authority or power to move people, and African Americans were the first to be moved. The bus driver noticed the people standing and ordered several African American people on the bus to give up their seats. All of them did as he expected, except for Rosa. When the bus driver told Rosa that if she did not stand up, he would call the police to come and arrest her, she quietly responded, "You may do that." When he asked her one more time to stand up, Rosa responded by saying, "I don't think I should have to stand up." Why do you think Rosa refused to stand up? Would you want to stand up if you were tired from working all day? The bus driver made the call, and before long, a police officer arrived. The officer wanted to know why she would not get up out of her seat. Rosa responded by asking the officer a question. "Why are you always pushing us around?" she asked. Rosa was arrested and taken to the police headquarters. Later that night, she was released on bail. Now, bail is the money someone pays when he or she has been arrested so that he or she can stay out of jail until the trial or hearing. The law at the time in Alabama gave bus drivers the right to assign seats, and it also gave them the right to carry guns. So the word assign means to give or to place. As a result, many African American people felt threatened and were frightened to challenge this practice. But Rosa had done so. Rosa later said that she had not planned to protest, but in that moment, her desire for civil rights and her sense of injustice drove her to make that decision. So injustice means the lack of fairness. "When I made that decision," Rosa said, "I knew that I had the strength of my ancestors with me." This was the moment that changed history. Rosa had refused to move, and now others would show their support for her. It was decided that the hundreds of African Americans who rode the city buses to work would walk instead. This kind of action is called a boycott. Now, a boycott is when a group of people join together and refuse to do business with a company or an organization. In Montgomery, people refused to ride the city buses. The NAACP began to organize what became known as the Montgomery Bus Boycott. African American women's groups began to organize too. A young man named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led the boycott. Dr. King said, "We will walk until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." Beginning on December 5th, 1955, people refused to ride the city buses in Montgomery. The boycott lasted for 382 days. So 1 year has 365 days in it. If the boycott lasted 382 days, was that shorter or longer than a year? That's correct. It was longer than a year that they boycotted the buses. Without passengers to ride the buses couldn't afford to run. And at that time in Montgomery, more than 7 out of every 10 riders on the buses were African Americans. Businesses were disrupted, and many white people supported the boycott too. On November 13th, 1956, the United States Supreme Court decided that Montgomery segregated bus seating was unconditional. That meant that it was against the law. A court order was served on December 20th, 1956, and the boycott ended the next day. After that, buses were integrated, and the African American people could sit wherever they wanted. That boycott became a powerful way for people to peacefully protest. So when people protest peacefully, it means that they do not use violence. Rosa Parks' actions helped to start the civil rights movement. In fact, Rosa Parks became known as the mother of the civil rights movement. Rosa remained an active member of the NAACP and other civil rights groups. She showed her support to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by participating in a civil rights march. Rosa became a member of the staff of Michigan Congress, and she worked in his office for 23 years from 1965 until she retired in 1988. Rosa also founded an institution to help young people complete their education. In her lifetime, Rosa received several awards for her courage and her work. In 1975, the NAACP awarded Rosa its Spingarn Medal. Rosa also received 2 of the U.S. government's most important civilian honors, or those honors given to people who aren't serving in our military. Rosa received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1996 and the Congressional Golden Medal of Honor in 1999. Rosa once said, "I see the bus pass every day, but to me that was the way of life. We had no choice but to accept what was the custom. But the bus was among the first ways I realized that there was a black world and a white world." Incredibly, by her own actions, Rosa Parks changed the world. Rosa became a symbol of the power of nonviolence, and her quiet, courageous act changed America and changed the course of history.